Thank you. Good evening and welcome to Silent Movie Night. That's called I Feel a Song Coming On, and I think that sets the tone for what we're going to do tonight. We're paying tribute to a very special friend, someone who is my personal friend, and I'm very proud of that, a lady who has contributed so much to the arts in Fargo-Moorhead. And on behalf of all the organists participating, Lance Johnson and Lloyd Collins, it's our privilege each to play something for Hildegarde tonight. And to do that, I'm going to go back to the 1930s. When Hildegarde was studying in Minneapolis, I believe at the Minnesota Theatre under Eddie Dunstetter, the most popular song at that time was a beautiful Gershwin ballad entitled The Man I Love, and it was a very big favorite of Hildegarde and Eddie's, and you'll hear a lot about Hildegarde and Eddie tonight. So for them, this romantic ballad, we'll have Mark put some real soft lights on this tonight. And for those of you who brought someone special with you and you're sitting up in the back of the balcony, we'll play this for you too. You know who you are. If you didn't, you better check a few rows around you. You never can tell.
Dave Knudtson. Ladies and gentlemen, as Dave said, welcome to another fabulous silent movie night at the Fargo Theatre. I'm Doug Hamilton, and it is a pleasure to be here tonight because, as somebody reminded me last night, what I usually do, I don't get to see the audience. So I need this. Pumps me up. Okay. We need a vote first. It's 1988, an election year. Everybody in favor of a magnificent evening signify by saying aye. Aye. I didn't hear you. Did anybody back there hear it? No. Okay, once more. Signify by saying aye. Aye. Okie doke. That's what we'll do then. Well, this is a very special evening for all of us who have been involved in silent movie nights for 14 years now. This is the 14th year of it. Started in November of 1974. And I was in California then. My brother sent me a tape of this evening and tried to describe to me on the tape what he'd experienced himself. And it was thrilling. And then a few years later, I got to emcee my very first silent movie night program here. That was in 1978. And that was when I had a little boy named Ben, who was brand new then. He's with me backstage tonight. It's the first time he's ever been here. It's a schmaltzy evening. we're all, putting some heart into this show because of the person that it's all about. You know, it's easy to say that the incomparable Hildegarde Kraus touches us, and she certainly has touched me. It's easy to say that she has brought music and joy to hundreds of thousands of people in her performing career. But the reason we've been using the word tribute is because that is how special this night is. It is a tribute to more than 60 years as a very fine entertainer. Now, everybody has worked hard on the show. Everybody has put their soul into it because that's what Hildegarde does. But the most important part of this show is the fact that all of you are here. That is the greatest tribute of all. Thank you very much. And now we're going to take a look back in the past and see a little bit of Hildegarde through her own eyes and the eyes of the times that she has lived through. Ladies and gentlemen, a special video commissioned for this evening and premiering for you tonight called simply Hildegarde.
The year is 1920. Douglas Fairbanks is fighting for honor in The Mark of Zorro. Mary Pickford is a major box office attraction in Suds. Lillian Gish is struggling for her life in Way Down East. And a young girl comes to Fargo to become an accountant. Her name is Hildegarde.
I was going to take an expert accountant course. And then I started to go to the Stone Piano Company, the music, you know, they said that everybody that was a musician would hang around the Stone Piano Company. So I go over there and I met a lot of different people that played the piano, and then there was the conservatory upstairs over the Stone Piano Company. And so I decided maybe I'd take a few lessons up there.
Her imaginative musical style was already fascinating music patrons in Fargo and led her to try her skill at the Orpheum Theatre.
Anyway, somebody suggested that I try out for a picture that was at the Orpheum Theatre. And they had had a lot of people, musicians, try out that were all real good ones that were much better than I, much better. And but they couldn't understand what these cues and all that. They'd be just maybe a suggestion of this is maybe 2 or 3 bars or something. You couldn't even read it with just not the left hand, but maybe the right hand. And they tried out, and they couldn't do it because you had to have an imagination. You had to make up these. So the different ones said, go over and try out there at the Orpheum Theatre. And so I did. And, of course, I could make up the stuff, you know. And they hired me.
Hildegarde was perfectly attuned to the magic of the silver screen. Her work at the State Theatre brought music, movies, and the man she would eventually marry, Eddie Kraus.
And that's where I met my husband. He came here as the manager of that theater, and he came as just a kind of to get things started. He came from State Lake in Chicago and the Hennepin Orpheum in Minneapolis, and he was supposed to kind of get business going. And well, anyway, I was playing there, and he just kind of liked me, and he used to come down to the organ. He asked me to go out and have a lunch with him, and I refused. I didn't really like him. And I would walk up one aisle, and he'd walk down the other. So one night he came down, and he said, now, you know, you've got to have something to eat. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty good. And so anyway, he had a line, I'll tell you. He really had a line. And so then we went out a few times, and, you know, I got to like him. He was a marvelous man, a very good showman. And so we only went together about 4 or 5 months, I think. Got married and lived happily ever after.
Hildegarde and Eddie formed a dynamic team of music and movies that led them to Hollywood in 1939.
Eddie and we went to Hollywood, and they wanted him to come out to see what the small exhibitor they would like in pictures. So we got to, we were there 6 weeks, and they paid for our entire time. They come and get us in a limousine in the morning and take us, and we had the breakfast with some of the big stars like Judy Garland that was sitting next to me. We weren't at the table with her, but right next to it. And then we had our pictures taken with Jimmy Stewart and Claudette Colbert. And we had, we could have had several others, you know, as well as we watched the beginning of Lucille Ball's, her first picture. And we stayed there all afternoon. We watched Jimmy Cagney in a picture, one whole afternoon. Everybody was so nice and so good to us. We had a wonderful time.
Admiration for her extraordinary talents has not been confined to the Midwest. She has received accolades from regional and state institutions and praise from the stars themselves. On her visit to the Fargo Theatre in 1986, the effervescent Colleen Moore requested that Hildegarde score her picture, Orchids and Ermine.
Of course, I do love Colleen Moore, you know. She was here a couple times, and she was so dear. And you get so, especially where you're with them, you know, and get to know them, talk to them.
The advent of talking pictures brought drastic changes in Hollywood and a temporary end to the silent cinema. But it also provided a new career for Hildegarde as a radio personality at WDAY.
I was there 28 years, you know. And I loved it. I did everything, music or did programs early at 7:30 in the morning, and it almost killed me to get up that early. But I did. I gave recipes. I played the piano. I played the organ. I took almost all of the people that came up to try out. But I took lots of auditions, and it was fun, you know. And I had a lot of different programs. I had lots of commercial programs. And then I had one at night, The Lady of the Evening. Now that was kind of I had a different meaning in those days.
Her programs were delightful and diverse and provided sparkling entertainment for 28 years. But Hildegarde could not be kept from the movies for long. There was a renewed interest in the silent screen, and soon Hildegarde's enchanting musical scores were being requested across the region. She brought her talent to a new generation of fans who were fascinated by the art of scoring a picture.
Well, yes, I do. I fake it. I don't always play the same thing for the same, maybe the next night. If I do it 2 nights, why, I might see something that I think would be better. Or like I said before, I've even gone so low, I would say that if I saw a little dog, I'd say, play the piece, Where's the Little Dog, Where's My Little Dog Gone?
Hildegarde's talents have brought joy and admiration from generations of fans. Yet the true tribute to Hildegarde's remarkable career remains the lady herself. Hildegarde brings a special magic to her music and to the people around her. She is truly incomparable.
And I just do. I love people. I just can't find anybody that I could say that I didn't like.
There you have it, a little video tribute to Hildegarde. Very soon, however, she'll be here in person to charm you, as only Hildegarde can. You know, we call her the incomparable for a very good reason. There is only one Hildegarde Usselman Kraus. They broke the mold or something. We have tonight the greatest musical entertainment for you. Dave Knudtson just played for you. We have Lance Johnson coming up, scoring an original score of the Harold Lloyd feature film for the night. But coming up right now, a man who's very talented in his own right. Ladies and gentlemen, for your musical enjoyment, at the console of the mighty Wurlitzer Theater pipe organ, Mr. Lloyd Collins.
I know you were expecting Doug Hamilton, but this is a night of surprises as well as tributes. I'm Ted Larson, and for 25 of the 28 silent movie nights, I have walked down the aisle of the theater with Hildegarde. You know, when you walk down an aisle with somebody, you imply a relationship. And I'm here to publicly state what some of you may have suspected for a long time. I'm in love with Hildegarde. And it's no quick romance. It started when I was 9 and used to sit in the balcony of this theater, lean over the edge, and hear those special songs that Hildegarde would play. And I wondered all about that marvelous Wurlitzer pipe organ and the films that were on the screen. I grew up to work in film. I teach film at Morehead State University. And when I discovered what Hildegarde could do to a film by Lillian Gish, Colleen Moore, Douglas Fairbanks, Rudolph Valentino, Clara Bow, whomever, I fell in love all over again with film and with Hildegarde. We know that Hildegarde has entertained us royally for 60 years. Have you ever wondered who entertains Hildegarde? Well, I know, and I'm here to announce that publicly too. It's Delmer J. Hansen. In addition to being my boss in the speech theater department at Morehead State University, he has directed 263 plays, the MSU Theater, created the Straw Hat Players, and for many of those opening nights, Hildegarde has been in those audiences. We thought it would be unique, interesting, fascinating, and an enjoyable experience for you if we could bring these two friends together and see what kind of a conversation would develop. So now it is my pleasure to present the incomparable Hildegarde and her very friendly companion, Delmer J. Hansen.
I think the audience, Hildegarde, might be interested in knowing how we first met, which was at a play I had directed, I suppose, 25, 28 years ago. And it was a play in which I had cast a great many women in the department. And up to that point, I suppose I was the typical male chauvinist of the early 1960s. At least my wife tells me I was. And I had always assumed that girls ushered for plays. I had never seen a play ushered by anyone but girls. So I went home for dinner one evening and said to her, I don't know what I'm going to do for ushers for this play. I don't have enough women left in the company to get enough ushers for the show. And she looked at me and smiled and said, well, can't men usher? And I had never really thought about it. And it was one of the many awakenings about women that my wife has brought to me over 30 years of marriage. And so I said, well, fine, why don't you make out a list? Well, she didn't use any of the women. She used all men as ushers. And following that evening's performance, this lovely lady sitting next to me and said, you're Del Hansen. And I said, right. And she said, well, I just want you to know that I appreciate having all those handsome young male ushers instead of those women. And from that point on, Hildegarde and I have been the best of friends. Shakespeare once said in one of his early comedies that if music be the food of love, play on. Well, Hildegarde's been playing on and on and on for well over 60 years now. And I think the audience might be interested, Hildegarde, in knowing how you got an interest in music. Where did it come from?
Well, I suppose that probably it came mostly from my father, because he could play any instrument and never had a lesson. He'd take me to a show or something, and he'd come home and could play the theme, then he'd ask me to play it, and I could kind of pick along and play, not as well as he did, but anyway, he was very musical, and my mother was a very good musician. So I just learned about music at a very early age.
When did you start to play for silent film?
Well, that was in my second year in high school. And we only had, the theater was only open on Saturday, Friday and Saturday. Sunday laws, of course, prohibited it. And then another thing, I couldn't have played and worked that late at night either, a schoolgirl. And I learned to cue pictures, silent movie pictures, and I want everybody to know that I was well paid. I got 25 cents a night. Probably overpaid.
Well, when I was in high school, I sold popcorn in a movie theater, and I got a penny a box.
I knew you were going to top me. You can't get ahead of this one.
What were some of those early things you played for? You mentioned last evening the serials.
Well, I played for a lot of the old, of course, old-timers, which lots of the names I've forgotten naturally, but I do remember Pearl White, that they always ended the picture, the train would be running, and just before it ran over her, she'd be on the railroad tracks, and just before it ran over, the train would stop. And then that would be, come back next week and see if the train ran over her.
Well, I think both Ted and I remember those early serials. I think we get that today on television with Dallas and Falcon Crest.
Probably.
At the end of the season, the plane crashes and we have to wait till fall.
That's right.
To
In
find...
that way, it's kind of about the same thing, just coming back a circle again.
Right. You mentioned last night that you came to Fargo, I believe, when you were 16.
That's right. I graduated from high school when I was 16.
One story Hildegarde told me one evening was that when she was in high school, she was taking a class in German, and all of the students had to learn to sing songs in German. Hildegarde played the piano for them, and I've always wanted to ask her, since you weren't really learning German, you were playing the piano, what kind of a grade did you get?
Oh, I got a good grade. I was a poor student, but I got a good grade anyway.
When you came to Fargo, you played in a number of theaters locally, did you not?
Yes, I did. I think probably the first one was at the Orpheum Theater, and that was kind of a funny thing that happened. I went over to the Stone Piano Company. At that time, it was the Stone Piano Company. Maybe some of the people would remember. And they were looking for somebody to cue a silent picture when Nightwood was in flower with Marion Davies. I wonder if anybody remembers Marion Davies.
Oh, of course. She married Hearst, the newspaper giant.
That's right.
I don't think she married him.
No, but
I think they just lived
had a
together.
relationship, yes.
Yeah.
They call it now a relationship.
Okay,
In
thank
case
you.
you didn't know. Well, anyway, several people, very good musicians, tried out for this. They sent cue sheets and maybe 2 or 3 bars of a suggested piece for a scene. But the notes were way above the ledger line. Nobody could read them. I couldn't either. But somebody said, why don't you go over and try out for that? And I was going to take an expert accountant course and drop the music business. But I went over and I tried it. And I think 5 or 6 different good musicians, much better than I ever thought of being, couldn't do it because it was a silent picture and they didn't know just how to handle it. But I got the job, and I worked there for a long time, until the Orpheum closed.
So if you couldn't read it, what did you do?
Well, I faked it. I just had to kind of think, well, now I wonder what will fit this scene. And you know, there was just a kind of a cue sheet to give you maybe a line or 2 of what might be said. And you had to just imagine. Of course, silent pictures is mostly imagination when you play for them.
We were talking one evening, I know, about the difficulty and the differences between serious film and comic film. And I was telling you that I always felt directing a comedy was much more difficult than directing a serious play. How do you feel about silent film?
I feel the same way about silent film. It's much more difficult to play for a comedy because there's a lot of fast moving in a comedy, and I like to play for a nice, kind of a quiet film that I can use some pretty music and maybe make up something and have a love theme that carries through the whole.
Out of all those film stars you played for, who were your favorites?
Well, of course, I really can't just make any real favorites because I like most all of them, but I like Jimmy Cagney, of course, and Ginger Rogers, and what was the one I told you about that was
the heartthrob of the 20s.
Yeah, that's the
Rudolph
one.
Valentino.
There you have it. There you have
Yeah.
it. The Rudolph Valentino. And you know, the funny part of it is, most of my girlfriends would always want to come and see Rudolph Valentino.
Do you think they'd still want him today?
Well, I don't know. Mostly he was in the tent, you know, and lying in the and
As I recall, he was usually in the tent with a woman, right?
Right, or lying on the sand.
Oh, on the sand,
Oh, yes,
too.
it was all very, imaginative. You had to have an imagination to watch Rudolph Valentino.
Well, Hildegarde, back in 1926, you married a man named Eddie Kraus.
That's
and I've
right.
always had a little bone to pick with you about that.
Oh, really?
And
Tell
that
me
is,
about it.
very simply, that was the year I was born, and I've often wondered why you didn't wait for me.
Well, is it too late?
I'll have to go home and check with my wife.
Okay. Well, Rhoda is such a good friend of mine that I think that she would approve that I said that anyway.
I think she would, too. I think the audience might enjoy knowing some things about Eddie. We know that he was involved in the theater business, but what did he do in Fargo in addition to that?
Well, of course, he was very active in all civic affairs, and he was one of the founders of the Bison Boosters here, along with a couple of others that have passed on, several others, rather. And he came from the State Lake Theater in Chicago and the Hennepin Orpheum in Minneapolis. And he came here with the idea, they sent him here to kind of boost up the theater business. And then, shall I tell you that he met me?
Yes, tell us about it.
Well, anyway, this was at the State Theater, and he'd come down when I'd finished my playing for my silent picture or whatever it was, and asked me out for coffee. And of course, I always made excuses because I had another boyfriend at that time. And but then he persisted. He kept coming down and asked, well, you have to have a cup of coffee. So that started over a cup of coffee, and we'd go to a little restaurant and order food and keep ordering food and ordering more food so we could stay there and hold hands finally. That's what it was, because I was living in a rooming house where I naturally wouldn't take him, and he was living in a hotel where he naturally wouldn't take me. And we fell in love just over all this coffee and no booze either, no.
You think that's a little advice you should give to the young people here tonight?
I don't know. Times have changed so much, Dale. You know, you change your mind on a lot of things when you get older. And you know, I don't pass the opinions on anything that people do. I think...
Excuse me.
Gee, I'm really making you nervous. You know, I didn't think I could make such a wonderful professor as Dr. Hanson is. I could make him nervous.
She's also upstaging me.
I'm so happy to have you here and have you do this interview because it's one of my proudest moments, I'll tell you that.
Well, during the 1950s, I know you and Eddie went to Hollywood, and the film showed the people, and you mentioned some of the people with whom you were with. But you were telling us last evening about Don Amici and Lucille Ball.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to tell the audience a little bit about them?
Well, I had really forgotten Don emcee until he won an Academy Award just this last year, I think it was. And he was kind of a young man, but the powers that be had him and his wife take us out to dinner, and then we went to Grauman Chinese together, and here he comes along after all these years and wins an Academy Award. And of course we got to see lots of the films. We were invited in to watch, like Lucille Ball, her first film. We were there for her first film. And of course, at that time I thought she was kind of frivolous, and she was playing up to all the men. Of course, I was past that, you know.
Well, of course.
But anyway, I probably would have done the same thing. But anyway, she was the kind of person that it seemed to me like one of the men directors did say, well, she's wants everybody to love her and to like her, you know, and that. But she's very talented, and I shouldn't say anything against her.
Well, you haven't. Does it surprise you, Hildegarde, that so many young people today are interested in silent film?
I don't think so. I think it's almost an education to watch, to guess what's going on with silent pictures, and if the music is compatible with the picture, I think it's an event. And I know a lot of real young people that say they love it.
I think also any good actor, and I think they had to be very good, particularly to play in the comedies, in the silent film.
Oh, absolutely.
Simply because of all the demands placed on them. Well, as you look back over this magnificent career of yours, is there anything you do that is different, would be different?
Well, I suppose there would be a lot of things. For one thing, I probably would have, I taken more lessons. I did go to conservatory and took lessons practically all the time that I was playing at the Orpheum, and kept practicing all the time. But I think I would have gone, I could have done better, let's put it that way. But it was fun.
In all of the years that I've known Hildegarde, the one word that constantly comes up when you talk to her is the word she used earlier this evening, and that is imagination. And I've always been very taken with a definition of imagination as being works of art that help to draw us out of ourselves and give us a life that really is not our own, which I think is what silent film, live film, television, the stage does for us. And you've certainly been giving Fargo Moorhead all of your imagination and your talent and your love for these many years. And I know you wanted to say a few words to the audience, so I'm turning it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. And I thank you so much for doing this. It's just been such a treat. But I do have this little message that I would like to read. You know, there always should be a surprise element in every show, and this is no exception. He doesn't know I'm going to say this. I would like to thank Dr. Delmar Hansen for this interview. Dr. Hansen and Rhoda are my very special friends, and I love them both so very much. Then I want to thank Ted Larson, professor at Moorhead State, who puts magic in everything he does. He has made this tribute to me so very special. Now, what could I do without Dave Knudtson, our theater manager, always helping to make things easy for me? And I want to thank Lloyd Collins, Dave Knudtson, and Lance Johnson for the special organ music. Lance, of course, is the founder of this beautiful Wurlitzer organ. And Doug, of course, was great. And I thank you all for coming to this very special party for me.
Well, I would say... I don't think we should let them escape our conclusion.
Okay.
You see, we decided that in every silent film, and the one you see tonight, the last thing you see in the blackout are the lovers kissing one another.
And so here we go.
There we go.
How do you go?
Delmar Hansen, and the incomparable Hildegarde. No, I think there's a bit of film history there, because it's my recollection that one of the very first films ever produced was called The Kiss. And it was kind of a gruesome sight, actually. Nothing as charming as what we just saw here. It was almost, well, what can I say? My son was standing backstage, incidentally, and he asked me, "Dad, does Hildegarde own that shirt?" She finished making payments on it about 3 decades ago, I think. No. Ladies and gentlemen, we have lots of surprises tonight. And one of the most special moments is coming up right now. I would like to introduce to you now the mayor of Fargo, the Honorable John Lindgren.
Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you. Doug and Hildegarde, I have a proclamation which outlines many of the wonderful and lovely thoughts that have been expressed in these 2 evenings here at the Fargo Theatre. The proclamation reads in part as follows: Whereas since 1926, audiences have thrilled to the music of Hildegarde, whether at the piano or at the organ, and whereas Hildegarde continues to inspire people and is asked to play for music clubs and style shows every week, and I might mention, I think she has a few open dates in May if anyone's looking for a program. And whereas for the past 10 years, Hildegarde's appearances here at Silent Movie Night have brought her unique artistry to a new generation of music lovers, and whereas much of the inspiration to restore this facility has come about because of the admiration this community has for Hildegarde, our favorite show business personality, we therefore proclaim this to be Hildegarde Usselman Kraus Week in the city of Fargo. Hildegarde.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I just want to thank the mayor for this honor. I am so pleased, and I want to thank all of you for coming to this special event. It's been a great thing in my life.
Great.
We'll see you later, okay? Now, a real big event is coming up. Probably the big point of the evening for me, at any rate, and I think you're going to be truly pleased by what's about to happen. But before we get to that moment, I'd like to tell you about something else that you might want to look at during the intermission. Up on the mezzanine, there is a new organ. It's not really a new organ. It's about a 62-year-old organ, actually, but it's been made new again. About 20-some-odd years ago, I remember being in the Fargo Theatre, and I was watching a James Bond movie. I think it was Dr. No. And I was wondering what this thing, this Hulk, was under the canvas over in this corner. Well, I found out yesterday that what was under that canvas is now up on the mezzanine. The original organ, the original Wurlitzer theater pipe organ for the Fargo Theatre, installed in 1926, is that instrument. It didn't play after the late 40s. It was put under a canvas cover and much abused, but with a lot of loving care, a lot of reconditioning by some very skilled craftsmen led by Lance Johnson, it plays again. It's a brand new instrument that has a lot of years left in it. Now, on this particular instrument, there is an inscription, and I'm going to read to you right now what that inscription is. It says, "This Wurlitzer was played by the incomparable Hildegarde Kraus, beginning in 1926, and is dedicated to her remarkable musical career." Ladies and gentlemen, the incomparable Hildegarde Kraus continues her remarkable musical career. She is in the pit, preparing the organ, and tonight, for your enjoyment, once again, I introduce to you the incomparable Hildegarde. the incomparable Hildegarde Kraus. That was a wonderful conclusion to Act One of Silent Movie Night, tonight at the Fargo Theatre. It's time now to start thinking about intermission, but before you start marching up the aisle, two things that I'd like to mention. Number one, there is somebody in the lobby conveniently placed to take your name and address if you'd like to be on the mailing list so that you can be personally notified the next time Silent Movie Night comes around. It's at least twice a year, and they're always different, always fun. The other thing, tomorrow you probably have seen the banners around town. The Yunker Farm Children's Museum is having a big affair. And you probably know, some of you, that one of the ways they raise money is to sell those fence pickets. A great way to raise money. Sort of like what the Depot did a while back. They sold bricks. You could personalize a brick and keep it there forever. Well, we don't have those kinds of personal mementos here, but there is a way that you can support this non-profit organization. And that is march up that aisle, buy all the candy and popcorn and pop you can buy. We'll see you in just a few moments for Harold Lloyd and For Heaven's Sakes.